This video is sponsored by War Thunder. Hello, my fellow patriots! I got that itch to play Old World Blues again, and when I was looking for something to play, I saw a submod called Rust Belt Rising, which fills in the rest of the Midwest, got a huge update. This mod also has the East Coast Rebirth mod as a dependency, so I'm going to be playing with that too. So the reason this Rust Belt Rising update attracted my eye was because it added a bunch of new content for a group called the Chicago Enclave. And as them, I'm going to be doing my best to clean up the wasteland and bring back American prosperity. We got a decent sized focus tree here and a lot of things to work on as we make our way to something big at the end. So, starting off with the lore. Who are the Chicago Enclave? For a while, the Enclave had a limited presence in the city with just an outpost, but after the Enclave's main base at Navarro was destroyed, the Secretary, who was in charge of the outpost, stepped in to pick up the pieces. He flew out survivors from the area and worked on building up a new Enclave base in Chicago. The operation went well, with Chicago being built up for the Enclave's purposes, and any problems caused or concerns raised by the locals in the area were quickly resolved. However, as the Enclave presence grew in the city, the Secretary was starting to face problems from within. Some of the refugees had positions of power and influence in the West, and they expected to keep it. These people, known as the cadre, were given fake jobs, and when they would talk in meetings about what the Secretary should do next, their feedback was handled accordingly. However, that only worked for so long. Eventually, they wanted more than, "The Secretary is thankful for your feedback." They wanted to actually do things. So the Secretary was like, "If you want representation so bad, I'll give you some," and chose the worst candidate amongst the cadre, a man named Harold Heyman, who had the awful ideas of recruiting wastelanders, working with post-war companies, and even integrating ghouls. When speaking, the rest of the room didn't take his ideas well, but at least the cadre was gonna be directing their complaints at Harold instead of the Secretary, so he was perfect. Harold then presented his new plan for building up the Chicago Enclave. He would set up a work program for the group called the Sunshine Outcasts that would give them citizenship after they finished their work quotas. The Secretary was blown away by the brilliance of his idea. Yeah, they could dangle citizenship in front of these savages while giving them impossible quotas to complete. And they could continue this plan with other groups around them as well. Harold was a bit peeved that his plan was being altered by the Secretary, but the pain was wiped away when he went to his office to play this video's sponsor, War Thunder. You too can wash away the pain of your boss ruining your ideas by playing the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and can play it for free now on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. They aren't exaggerating either. There are over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships designed by 10 major countries over the past 100 years. The detail in this game is crazy because all those vehicles are modeled down to their base components. Vehicles don't have health bars, so you have to fight your enemies just like in real life. When you shoot, you can see how your shot damages your enemy with their X-ray view, which shows how a shell penetrates and what components and crew members it hits. The devs have worked hard to create an immersive experience for their players, not just in the gameplay, but in sound designs and visuals to make you feel like you're driving these powerful war machines. That's why over 95 million players have already started playing War Thunder, because there's no game like it. There's no cost for you to try it because remember, the game is available for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile devices. make sure to do so through one of my links below in my description or pinned comment, because if you're a new player or haven't played in over 6 months on PC console, you'll get yourself a massive bonus pack with 100,000 silver lions, 7 days of premium accounts, and a cool vehicle skin. This bonus is only available for a limited time though, so don't delay. Now back to Chicago. Before implementing Harold's plan, we got word of a conflict happening by our old base in Navarro. The Secretary sees this as a second chance for the Enclave. There are still sympathizers. If we support the free folk in this war, Eureka can expand and rebuild our presence in the area. Even with our support, we're still very outnumbered, but one of my power armor divisions is basically worth 3 of theirs. The under-equipped NCR soldiers can do little besides give my soldiers a headache and are forced to flee as I make way to the Californian settlements in the area. With the fall of Alder Springs, the Navarro territories collapsed, and we were free to focus on the She-supported faction, who despite having little opposition in their way, barely pushed at all. Once my power armor divisions pivoted south, it was curtains for the Fusang group. We bulldozed our way into their capital, and once we controlled the town of Santa Rosa, they packed it up. Eureka could expand over the Navarro area and give the Enclave mission a second chance. Our spies hear chatter from Shady Sands that the NCR is planning to invade Eureka to avenge their humiliating defeat, but we can get them to calm down. High Command is surprised to see communications re-established with people in the area and are more than happy to give them any aid they need to increase their strength in the area. As they build up their strength, I'm building up my own power base around Chicago by getting invasion plans ready for the Junction group to our southwest. But as we expand, there is going to be a problem. Who is going to rebuild the great nation of America? Especially when there are so few pure American patriots out there. Enter Project Rebirth to answer that question. While the plans for the project are formulated, our armies are on the warpath. Our robot troops will push on the northern bank of the Illinois River, while the power armor troops push along the southern bank. It wasn't even a fight for our guys though, more of a training exercise considering how poorly equipped the tribals were. Hell, they couldn't even kill any of my guys, it was that unbalanced. As we closed in on their final settlements, Project Rebirth had begun development. We will populate our newly liberated land with clones of pure American patriots, like the late great Frank Horrigan. We will create an increasingly loyal and powerful citizenry that shall build the Enclave's dream. Next up, we're going to be lighting up the Sunshine Outcast. As expected, the tribals in the area could do little besides scratch the paint on my power armor and robots. They were quickly trampled under my boots. Project Rebirth was finally turning out some results. The first batch of clones were finished, and they were looking great. Soon, we would have an army of Frank Horrigans to reclaim America. When some of them started emerging from their tubes, the scientists started celebrating their accomplishment. But quickly, things started going wrong. The cooling system for the cloning machine started failing, and we don't have a backup one since we're missing a vital component. We can't create new clones without that cooling system, so for now, the project is paused. The only lead we have on where to find this component is in a droid depot by Detroit, so we will have to move over there soon. I'm checking in on what our Western Enclave allies are up to, and they're really just doing anything but the one branch they need to do to expand our influence. It's kind of pissing me off. But for now, I'm just gonna focus on my neighborhood. Harold's plan to secure Michigan is written out in Operation Mitten Squad. We will befriend the AI that runs the city of Detroit, Ford, and assist it in its efforts to clean up the state of Michigan. This is not the only state where we're going to expand though. our envoys make their way to the stockyard in Wisconsin. Harold is forced to deal with a lot of skepticism from his peers for this plan, but despite everyone's disdain with working with outsiders, they can't deny the reality that they actually have decent food, so we're gonna tough it out. Over the next few months, my divisions help spread Enclave influence around the Great Lakes. Our enemies are easily pushed aside by my veteran soldiers and send nothing but good news back home. Can't say anything about what our alleged allies in the West are doing though, they still look asleep at the wheel. Anyways, since everything is so smooth around Chicago, I attempt the challenge of spreading Enclave influence down south in Texas. Even though the content here is unfinished, I want to see what happens. You create a new tag in Western Texas called the Texas Expedition. They don't have any industry, they're basically fully reliant on you to support their mission. They started their first war against the Cypher Warband in Lubbock and immediately face-planted. It really hurt to see them throw away valuable power armor like that. When my men deploy, the expedition was already on its last legs, but we breathed in some new life for them. We sent those savages running for the fields. Then I rescued their last power armor unit who got cut off, and I was confident we could end the warband soon. As that happened, I realized I needed to be sending support to one of our most important allies, MacArthur. Our fiefdom in Montana needs to expand to give us more resources. Back in Texas, we are heavily outnumbered, but speed will be my greatest strength here. By keeping the AI on the back foot in the defensive, my units can seize their settlements and end the war quickly. After the warband's defeat, this leaves our expedition a wide front to face Lubbock with, and they just have way too many troops for me to deal with at the moment. So I look where I can to try to thin their numbers out. The savages overextended themselves on their way to attack Helford, and I moved in to stop them. With their lines thinned out, I could go in for the kill. I focused on moving southwards to their capital city. Once their initial front line broke, they had nothing to stop me as I marched towards Lubbock. My soldiers wouldn't get much time to breathe after this victory though. The expedition had a lot of enemies in the area, and when one was knocked down, there was another to replace it. However, it's not like each new enemy was stronger than the last one, so my veteran troops calmly dismantled the opposition on their way south. Finally, we ended this campaign with the destruction of Shale's army as we walked into the settlement of Ozona. All my attention could now be focused on assisting MacArthur in their fight against the Sisters of Steel. For a while, I thought I was doing a great job pushing these savages back, but then I zoomed out on the map and I realized they were actually about to encircle my ass. My allies were just content to leave me out to dry, I guess. All my volunteers had to immediately haul ass back to fight their way to the friendly lines. I was concerned they weren't gonna make it for a while because of the lack of energy in the units, but the one division who could have stopped me just stared and let me pass. Once all my troops recharged, they were much more careful on their next attack, being more mindful of how they went about destroying the Sisters of Steel, leaving few troops spared. At this time, our investments in Michigan and Wisconsin were maturing and it was time to collect. Starting with the Ford Motor Company, the AI said yes with no stipulations and Michigan was restored under true American rule. Harold went to the secretary to report the success of the operation, and the secretary seemed pleased with what he was saying, but not happy enough to call him his actual name. Something that continued to irk Harold, but he still took it in stride. As the war appeared to be wrapping up in Montana, the Texas expedition was on the march again towards Austin. I soon entered the final few core settlements of the Sisters of Steel and thought that I could take a break from looking at the Rockies for a while, but an 11th hour entrance by the Great Khans was keeping this war going. They were actively swarming MacArthur at this time, so this capitulation brought them time to reorganize their lines. So, I'm actively involved in 2 conflicts right now, but I figured, you know what, why not get involved in a 3rd one? Because Raven Rock, led by President Eden, is trying to secure our nation's former capital, and we can't let them fail. Because I'm dealing with all these conflicts, I haven't looked west in a while, and when I finally remember to check in on Eureka, I see they were just swallowed up by the NCR and She. All that investment and hope, just for them to die immediately. I'm pissed. It makes me really appreciate that one feature when I was playing Lost Hills where you get pop-ups telling you to send volunteers to your aligned factions. Maybe it's for the best because I already have my hands full enough with keeping MacArthur alive. I was rushing to finish off one of their enemy factions called the Ruminators, but this probably wasn't the best use of my attention at the time, with the Great Khan still running over MacArthur. I think they were only alive out of AI incompetence because MacArthur's capital just sat completely open to walk in for a good while. I didn't want to give up this fight though, so I quickly redeployed my divisions over there to the few remaining core settlements. Back home, Operation Cold Heart had come to a conclusion and we integrated Wisconsin. Harold, after reading the after-action reports, ran to the secretary to complain about some things he saw, like the miles of forests and farmlands destroyed and scores of people driven to cannibalism. The secretary calmly explained that this was not an intended outcome for the operation. When the Enclave conducted all those raids destroying the local farmland, they expected the people to just accept death by starvation like a civilized person, but clearly expectations were too high for such savages. The end result is the same though. The Enclave cleared a lot of land for future American settlers. Now Harold didn't take that well. In addition to being called the wrong name again, he felt responsible for the lives lost in Wisconsin because he's the one who wanted to expand the Enclave there. Back in Montana, I was working with the remaining MacArthur troops to calm down the situation. Con troops were getting cut off left and right, and it looked as if we're seeing a turning point. The other theaters of Texas and Washington DC were at a stalemate for now, but commanders remained confident that Enclave interest would prevail. Returning to Chicago, Harold had reached his last straw after finding a plan by the secretary to take over some newly discovered nuclear silos to nuke a Brotherhood chapter in Kansas City. He stormed into the secretary's office and went off on him for corrupting his really good plans over the past few years. After enduring Harold's deranged ramblings, the secretary calmly dismantled his arguments, explaining how full of himself Harold is and how his plans always lack sight of the bigger picture. But instead of taking this criticism on the chin and bettering himself, Harold lashed out further and used the energy pistol he brought to blast the secretary's eyebot. For a brief moment, the room was quiet. Harry thought he genuinely killed the secretary, but that turned out to be untrue. Of course, the secretary wasn't contained in that single eyebot. He reappeared on a screen along with a new combat robot. After further explaining to Harold the error of his ways, he sent him to another world to reflect on them. However, this left a problem for the secretary. If word got out about Harry's fate, the cadre would want a replacement, and he definitely didn't want to deal with another one of these people. So to avoid that, he would pretend that Harold was still alive by pretending to be Harold himself and giving Harold all of the secretary's duties. Now, you may wonder how the secretary will convince people Harold is alive when he never leaves the building he's in. Well, hey look, we got a new combat robot to use. Anyways, All continues to go well on the Montana front as we clean out the Rockies from the tribal presence. Unfortunately, can't say the same about Texas. They're all coming together to stop my expedition, and I'm afraid it's too much this time. They aren't even wasting any time. The Texans are moving as fast as possible to cut off our armies. I tried my best to give the expedition a fighting chance. I made counterattacks wherever I see the opportunity to, but this front is just hell to fight on. However, as a small consolation, the fight for DC is going well for me. Enclave soldiers are successfully reclaiming the White House from its savage and mutant squatters. Meanwhile, in Montana, tribal hordes continue to attempt raids on MacArthur settlements through the Rockies. Our brave soldiers continue to fight the good fight and neutralize those savages. But the trouble clearly isn't coming to an end soon, with yet another tribe declaring war on MacArthur. Right after that, I get reports that the main HQ in Texas is being overrun, and before we lose everything we put here, the secretary orders a mass evacuation from the area. Texas has been a lost. On the bright side, I just realized ever since Harold's promotion, I have a larger volunteer cap, so I can send nearly double the divisions, which is exactly what MacArthur needs, because after all this conflict, they almost lost their entire army. I'm protecting a nation on hospice care right now. With so few divisions left, we're down to defending a small perimeter around the main base. The cons have retaken everything else. When the next batch of reinforcements arrive, we immediately start pushing out, liberating a lot of territory and giving MacArthur some necessary breathing room. Now, some of y'all may be wondering what even the point of this is. I know it looks like I'm trying to defibrillate a body in a coffin right now, but I think there is still some hope for MacArthur. The cons' losses are catching up with them, and as far as I know, Standing Rock doesn't have a military access agreement with the Midnight Union, so once I kill enough cons, I can destroy their faction, since they haven't uncapitulated the Sisters of Steel. Over the next few months, I go after any overextended tribals so I can thin out their numbers, send all the equipment I can to MacArthur so they can rebuild their army, and send a core of troops towards the heart of the Great Khans. Meanwhile at home, with control of Michigan, our boys in the lab have gotten the part they needed to fix the cloning machine, and we can now make new citizens at will. Although, I was expecting we'd get a bit more than this. After months of grueling fighting and marching through the Rockies, my troops finally carved a path through the Great Khans and killed them. MacArthur could finally breathe, but we still had to deal with Standing Rock. This was actually a lot easier than you'd think. With a solid front line, we could just walk forward and run over them. The natives didn't have any ability to fight my power armor. Meanwhile in the east, Eden was on the move again, moving into Pennsylvania, and it looked like he could use my help. None of these savages could fight our mission, so within weeks we captured huge swaths of territory. After the capture of their capital Napoleon, Standing Rock was forced to stand down, and finally MacArthur could have some peace. Now I could take some time to focus on things in my neighborhood. Remember the nukes Harold was complaining about not being told about? It was time to go after them. The secretary sent a team out to explore a long abandoned bunker, and after a while of searching, the team discovers a terminal that gives us the location of 3 nuclear silos containing ICBMs that we could use in Illinois. It's funny how the decision menu hypes up the Brotherhood as an actual competitor to getting these nukes when they're getting their asses kicked by the Mutant Liberation Army. In reality, these nukes are just kinda free loot for me to pick up. Interesting update from the West Coast. Caesar died and the Legion fell into a civil war, so it looks like the NCR is gonna roll over Arizona. Now, as I expected when finding these nukes, nobody's capable of stopping me. This might as well be another training exercise for my units. Cutting back to MacArthur for a bit, after investing so much into their survival, the Secretary decided that they needed to be held on a tighter leash. On the night of March 18th, 2281, several vertibirds set out from Chicago to land at MacArthur's HQ. Within them contained a team of power-armored soldiers led by Special Agent Johnson who, once they departed the aircraft, liquidated MacArthur's leadership. Agent Johnson will take control of the Montana project, making sure they deliver on Chicago's needs without interruption. I can soon get them into my faction and give them some desperately needed help for their wars. They were trying to bring Canada under the Enclave umbrella, and they're already face planning. I guess they've lost too many people in their past wars. Fortunately for them, I can pair drop in some fresh troops to save them from certain death. While I saved Montana, I secured the final nuclear site from the Mutant Liberation Army. With all 3 sites under my control, a countdown begins on when I can use these nukes. Since I'm at war with both the Midwestern Brotherhood and Mutant Liberation Army, and they've been killing each other with their war, I'm walking through Missouri pretty much unopposed. I'm soon about to actually have a border with Texas, and could possibly avenge the failed expedition from earlier, but it looks like the NCR is about to bag them after dealing with the Legion in Arizona. The Mutant Liberation Army is dead in the middle of September, and with them gone, I have complete control of Missouri and Arkansas. This puts me in an awkward position a week later when I finally unlock the nukes I captured. We can launch a single nuke at Kansas City, glass the state, or keep them in reserve. Now, although the Midwestern Brotherhood has been subdued, I think it's safe to be sure. That is pretty much the end of the narrative content for the Chicago Enclave, and low-key a letdown. The end of the focus tree is building up for some big confrontation against the Midwestern Brotherhood, and they just ate shit and died. But you know what? There is another rival to our power I'd like to take on, who just swallowed up all of Texas and is soon moving in on Oklahoma. I say that, but what's actually funny is that President Kimball isn't even being super aggressive here. Countries around him just keep declaring on the NCR, so the nation just keeps getting bigger and bigger. In order to rebuild America, we're going to have to destroy the NCR. And to make sure we're ready, we're gonna have to make big preparations for the largest war the Chicago Enclave has been in yet. I'm calling it Operation Manifest Destiny. Another thing the boys in the lab are working on is implant technology, to make sure our soldiers are ready for the fight up ahead and rebuilding the country right after. The Secretary wants to be as prepared as possible, since by October, the NCR has created a vast empire. From Navarro to Houston, it is quite the intimidating country. After a few more months of preparation, I finally begin our war justification. Just then though, the NCR begins an invasion of Ouroboros, and not quite sure what the logic here is. Right before we invade the NCR, the cybernetic war forms are finished researching, and I immediately start rolling them out on the front line. These are our perfect soldiers, and they will perform exceptionally on the battlefield. However, there appears to be a few slight, unaccounted for cost with using them. We'll walk it off, no problem. On July 7th, 2284, I begin Operation Manifest Destiny. Today, we will avenge the fallen in the Texan expedition and the Battle of Navarro, and soon rebuild the great nation of America. All across the front line, Texas, I see nothing but green bubbles. The NCR lines are folding like wet cardboard. By the end of the month, what can I say? Maybe I overprepared for this war. Despite our dominance on the battlefield, we still have people thinking they can take us on though. The Canadians are trying to push past the Rockies by declaring on the Montana Enclave. but I have little concern they'll be an issue. I'll handle them as easily as I handled the NCR. I mean, look, it's not even 3 months yet, and I haven't even lost 200 people. Meanwhile, the NCR is closing in on 60,000 casualties. There are a few problems though. My lines are dangerously overextended as I push past Texas, and the NCR is mopping up Ouroboros and Diana, so they will free up more forces for a counterattack. Resistance is also becoming an issue. Despite us seal clubbing armies across the battlefield, rebel groups in Texas are chipping away at my forces. Also, because of my implant technology, more nations around me are feeling like they need to do something about us, which is not ideal since the last thing I need is more front lines to fight on. Unfortunately, while I focus on Texas, I completely ignored Montana, and things got a bit out of hand there. So I sent a small detachment of robots to try to take some land back. But I really should have cut my losses after seeing that surrender progress, because just 2 weeks later, when the bots were arriving, Montana capitulated. Those divisions completely cut off now, and now I gotta send more guys up there. Of course, that's when a random group called Rochester tried taking a swing at me because of the implants, so yet another distraction I have to deal with before the troops went north to stop the Canadians. I couldn't train more divisions, my lines were becoming more overextended, and worst of all, the map would constantly break my frontline order, so divisions could often run off and get themselves encircled. The NCR then responded with a massive counterattack along the Texas coast, and I struggled to deal with it since I lacked the numbers. So I just decided to cut my losses and fall back for a bit in Texas so I can group everyone together again. I needed to get the initiative back in my favor, so I changed up the template for my garrisons to have more Enclave bots in them to do better suppression. Also, I trimmed some unnecessary support brigades for my divisions. Now we can get some reinforcements for the first time in a long while. Gonna need those bots fast because yet another tribal is taking a swing at me. And of course they have to be right between me and the NCR. I wasn't concerned about not being able to beat them, of course. It was more the matter of now there is so much more frontline to guard. But at least at this point, I've given my army a good amount of time to recover and go back on the offensive. Once again, on the open terrain, the NCR and her allies are getting smashed, but even though I'm winning battles and taking vast swaths of territory, there are always new enemies for me to fight. The front has expanded in a way that I'm coming into Montana from the south, and as much as I'd love to liberate Montanan territory, I just don't have much to fight up there. At one point, I just look at the diplomacy map mode and I'm just like, damn, maybe I got a bit optimistic here. We've lost all our stability and war support, and we're running through manpower again. It's not looking good. You'd think with a KD ratio like this, there is no way I could be having such problems, but when your enemy just keeps fighting no matter what, and there is just so much land I need to garrison, it gets so tiresome. Once I get to the Rio Grande River, all the issues with resistance and overextension just compound on each other, and I'm looking at a front that is just ready to collapse. I had to start ordering fallback orders across the Rio Grande, and I tried to reform another defensive line. But just when things get stabilized for a bit, our implants malfunctioned, basically nuking my industry for 90 days, and that's when I realized I'm out of combat robots. Before this war, I built up such a solid stockpile, I thought I could never run out, but the years of combat and rebel action finally caught up with me. With front lines also getting weird, leading to more encirclements, my army was crippled. I soon grappled with the reality that the only way to avoid a complete destruction here was a full retreat from Texas. Not everyone made it back, sadly. A few guys were cut off in checkpoint Alpha, As I fell back, I realized there was a giant open flank, and realistically, I had little chance of containing the hordes of troops advancing through Kansas. Knowing that it was only a matter of time before they collapsed my remaining troops, I made yet another retreat to the Mississippi River. There, I could defend along a few river crossings and the city of St. Louis. This is really my last chance to stop them. If we can stop them here, they're gonna overrun us in Illinois. I also realized the coalition high-key shredded my air force, but I shifted manpower around so I can fly sorties over Missouri again. We prepare our divisions for the Bears' arrival, and they light us up from all sides. Most of our divisions hold strong though, but they manage to make a small breakthrough along the riverfront. While this is happening, the siege of Checkpoint Alpha continues, with Enclave troops continuing to bear the waves of Canadians coming after them. In St. Louis, a quick counterattack is organized to prevent the NCR from reaching the city center. Some machines did a quick flanking attack to move behind that breakthrough and cut them off by the suburb of Washington. Those coalition troops were quickly eliminated, and my machines moved back to the defensive positions in the city. With that, the first battle of St. Louis was won. Fighting calmed down for a while. The only action was the Canadians beating down the walls of Checkpoint Alpha. For over a year, that place held out despite being cut off with no support coming. But steadily, the Canadians eliminated division by division until there were no more. After that, I was pretty stumped on what to do next. I mean, I've caused so many casualties to our enemies, but they can still make more soldiers. Meanwhile, I'm scraping the barrel after 15,000 casualties. It's unfortunate, but I think I'm just gonna have to accept that this is just a stalemate. Because, forgive me, I really just don't have the mental capacity to spend at least another 2 to 4 hours probably just hand microing all my units across the entire continent. Still quite an interesting end though. The Enclave mostly dominates the US east of the Mississippi, while the west is controlled by Democratic forces. I'd say overall this playthrough was alright. You start off super overpowered with pretty decent tech and honestly not bad industry. I had to nerf myself to make this playthrough more interesting for me by reducing my manpower with doctrine and of course doing those bad implant techs. The focus tree has an interesting build up and story, but it is very dependent on the AI doing certain focuses, and man, they take their sweet time getting there. Eventually, you reach a point where it's like, bro, I don't want to sit here doing nothing, so I just tagged over to the AI to progress through their focus tree so I can do stuff. Anyways, what matters is that I hope I made an entertaining video for y'all. If you did, make sure to leave a like so other people will see this video too. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile by using my links in the description or pinned comment. If you're new or haven't played in 6 months, you'll get a big goodie bag with 100,000 Silver Lions, premium vehicles, and a week of premium account. Thank you to my alumni going the extra mile to support my content on Patreon. Y'all mean a lot to me. And I try to take the best care of y'all on the battlefield. Now, I didn't forget about CK3 y'all. I will be finishing that Byzantine campaign soon, so I hope to see y'all again for that.